All right, we're going to get started here, everyone. If you could please take your seat. To kick off our afternoon session, I would like to introduce to you Troy Lau. Troy Lau is the leader of AI, Human, and Data Technology Division at Draper. He oversees the execution of over 30 current projects that deliver operational software technologies to the U.S. Department of Defense, intelligence community, NASA, commercial, and biomedical industries. Prior to his current role, he started and led the first AI ML group at Draper, and in 4 years grew it to over 25 staff members across 20 projects. Please welcome Troy.
How's it going? Thanks, everybody. I got the post-lunch crowd. I've been long strategizing an approach to how you serve lunch for those of you who have to give a lot of presentations. I think we had a pretty healthy lunch today, which should sustain your energy. And if you ever have to give terrible news in a talk, give it over lunch. Have really spicy food or really delicious food where people just are overwhelmed by the food and don't ask questions. You can put people to sleep. You can keep there's strategies to it, but yeah. So thanks for the intro. I head up AI at Draper, and the division I lead captures what I call the full stack to take AI to operation. Everything from UI, UX to mobile to web to the AI ML team, the data, and we just created a digital engineering group as well as a DevOps group as well. So kind of the full process to get it there. So there's a pretty good mix of you here, and some of you are looking to start your career or get back into the workforce, and we've seen some awesome talks of a range of different companies. The Facebooks of the world are at what I call one end of the spectrum of really born and bred out of data, out of data science, AML. You can choose to go to those companies. Amazing, right? You're following the herd and pushing the herd forward. There's a whole other end of the spectrum of companies that still may be at the bleeding edge, but have been around for 30, 40, 50, 100 years, and they might be selling something amazing, some bleeding edge technology, but inside of them is still a very traditional organization. And it can be a very rewarding career to push that company forward into the data and machine intelligence revolution. And that's going to be my story today, how I kind of am still pushing Draper into that direction. We built a lot of amazing things, a lot of things face out that are awesome, but there's still a lot of change that can come internally. So when I was looking back and putting together this talk, I really saw it happen in 3 stages. And it may surprise you, but I'm going to start off talking about the really cool things that Draper builds. And I'll give an overview, talk about Draper and what we do, because it's kind of important. But building the technologies that face outwards, that was the easiest thing, right? The government, the commercial world, they're all invested in machine learning and data. They want that. That was easy. It brings in money. Once it was really successful with that, people started, hey, we can use some of these tools internally to make our decision making better. It took, if you look at the bottom here, it took 3-4 years of those external successes to convince people to change their operations. And it actually took some pretty jarring world events, which we'll go into. We've been doing that for the past few years. And then just recently, I've been at Draper 7 years, so there you can get the timeline there. We're just now starting to let it drive some of our business decisions that come from, that can hopefully aid some of our experts in this process. So I want to give a little bit of background because it really helps to set the tone. And some of you, I think I've talked to a number of people here who, because of our tie to MIT, know someone had worked at Draper. So this may not be a surprise. We're actually founded, 80 years ago. Spin-off of MIT, building guidance systems. Actually, back in 1932, it was machine gun sights on top of battleships, so you could shoot down Japanese aircraft. That evolved into building the Apollo guidance computer to land men on the moon, and a bunch of other kind of aerospace technologies, every modern spacecraft, modern aircraft, unmanned systems. We're really a applied R&D company taking things, what I call, across the valley of death from the TRL 2-3 level. If we think MIT as like the TRL 1-3 level, we take stuff from MIT and those type of universities and try to get them in the hands of the U.S. government or different commercial entities. Just down the street, I walked over here in about 10 minutes this morning. Do about, I think that's now this year, over $700 million. About 2,000 employees, 1,200 technical, about half of that are PhDs, probably a third MIT alumni in some way, so a lot of ties. We do all sorts of things, and this is really important to, you'll see I'm talking about, guidance systems I talk about, MEMS, all sorts of things that go really small. Number of other capabilities. Precision instrumentation, things that are fault tolerant. For those who don't know what that means, right? I'm a data scientist, so I think I make something that's like fault tolerant when I have a couple of checks in my code. These are things that are in hardware that have to handle like blasts of radiation from space and be quadruply redundant. Otherwise, the spacecraft will, fly into the sun. So that's another level of fault tolerance that most of us don't think about. Secure and assured systems, that's all cyber. A big part of my area is human-centered solutions, so both understanding how a human might use something. Our analysts use our AI/ML technologies, analysts for the intelligence community. They could be doctors, could be so on and so forth, but also understanding human beings, everything from disease spread. You'll see some of this talk to how terrorists might operate in a certain environment. Image data analytics, you see it, biomedical, exploding space. We do a lot of work there in the materials. So that's broad spectrum. And if you're going to take away anything from this, yeah, we do a lot of cool stuff, but this creates a lot of silos of technology and a lot of silos of an organization, which you'll see playing. We're also spread out. 95%, give or take a few percent, are actually just down the street. But we have a number of other sites kind of focused around where our customers are. Once again, creates other kind of silos of communication. And this is probably one of the biggest kind of deviations or delineations in the organization. We, about 35-40% of our work is R&D. 20% of our work takes it to prototyping, something that you can actually hold and use. 20% is about handing some of that prototype off to a real user, largely the government. And then the smallest percent of our work is sustainment and support. We don't manufacture much of anything at a large scale. We don't put a lot of things into development, into deployment ourselves. We'll usually hand that off. So once again, a lot of different parts of an organization as well here too. So taking all that into account, where did I start this kind of push as I joined Draper 7 years ago into AI? Well, a lot of people are really good at selling stuff and solving other people's problems before they solve their own. I was going to use the example of like a Tesla car salesperson. I don't think there's actually Tesla car salesmen, but I wonder how many Tesla car salesmen actually drive a Tesla and use that. It's a lot of places are more ready to sell something before they're ready to use it themselves in terms of a core technology. So I started by not convincing Draper to go all in. I convinced Draper's customers to go all in. And over the course of the years, built up a number of different programs and business areas. We do a lot of work for the IC, that's on the top left there, big data intelligence. I'll dive into, now I'll skip that one, you'll see. Analyzing human behavior in cyber. We do work across a range of biology, both kind of in biometrics. You can, I'm not wearing my Fitbit today, but those type of things all the way down to organ on a chip systems and measuring cells move around a plate. We do work in autonomous cars that are for the commercial world as well as autonomous vehicles. And we've done work for Wall Street as well. So all these areas are areas that we built up, got a good customer base. People started saying, wow, this is really powerful stuff. A few areas that I can dive into, so you're probably familiar, Draper does a lot of work that's classified or somewhat secretive for the US government, but what I can talk about, some of the cool things we've done. Checkpoint security. Everybody's favorite place to be in the world is at the TSA screening checkpoint, and it's kind of a joke. Hopefully that didn't offend anybody, but it is. And we've built a fully automated system that can basically, you stand there, you get prodded, prod's a bad word, you get pinged with a bunch of questions, it reads all your biometrics, and can classify with 85% accuracy. We run thousands of subjects whether you have the intent to do harm. One of the drawbacks is it's actually slower than going through TSA, so there actually hasn't been a lot of adoption there, but 10, 15 years of development, it's actually used in other checkpoints around the world. I'll just leave it at that. Biomedical data analysis, so we've done work, I'm sure you're all familiar with all the biomedical imaging approaches. We are also working, Draper has an organ on a chip platform that can basically run 100 experiments simulating different organ systems at a microscopic scale simultaneously. Of course, that's great, except it creates not just one experimental data run, it creates 100. You've got all that data, you have to analyze that. We push that forward. Commercial satellite imagery, we work a lot in that space. Search and rescue is one, nice example that I can just say out here. And then our work with analysts, more data is all great, we talk about it, but also cause more headaches. And this is a little different than I would say the broader, what you see in the Facebooks and the other big tech companies is the US government and the IC has data problems that you cannot miss anything, right? So if we misclassify a face, right? If I post a picture of my family on Facebook and it auto tags who's who, and if it misses my wife, big deal, I'll just tag her, no big deal, right? If that's something scanning for, say, Bin Laden, I know Bin Laden's been dead for like 10 years, but if you miss the picture that Bin Laden's wife posted of him at Disney World, well, crap, that's a blown opportunity, right? So when I say more data, more headaches, right, the US government has a slightly different data problem is they have a ton of data and a failure rate that has to be much narrower than we tolerate in the commercial world. So we work in that space as well, immensely. So that's a sampling of the programs. I know it's also just XYZ, it's abstracted out, but this is the growth of all the projects we've done over the past 5 years. I know it's a little bit out of date, but if you see this, you see everything, you're gonna be like, wow. AI is taking over Draper, stories everywhere, right? This is a company that's totally bought in. In fact, take away the Draper part of it, many companies that you see are gonna be advertising this, and it's like, wow, this is company bought in. And then you're gonna show up to your first day of work and be, holy crap, they are doing this, but this is what they sell, and what's left? What's left inside? So, okay, I kind of skipped ahead. Let me actually go back one slide. So it's not like I started doing this and then one day someone said, okay, Troy, here's the keys to our organization. Let's put AI in everything, right? There's actually two pretty jarring world events that kind of forced our hand, and I kind of give it away in the first one. The first one is, right, almost 2 years ago to the day, right, COVID. So I gave you the background of our company. Actually, let me stick on this. Right, Draper is not a place where everybody could go work from home. We've got a bunch of classified labs, we've got bio labs, we've got hardware labs. Draper was closed physically for a grand total of a week. And then people had to come back in. And we had to come back in when, COVID is terrible, but we didn't know whether COVID was Ebola or not at the time, but we had to come back into work. So how did we respond? Well, that's where they started handing over the keys and realizing, well, we need to start analyzing some of our operations data. And one of those things is analyzing how people move about the building. So like a lot of high security facilities, Draper, you got badges that you scan, you go in the door, you go into different facilities. We're able to track people pretty robustly across the company as they moved around physically. There's stuff like emails, there's stuff like calendar invites as well. We took all that data and started understanding how people were coming into work during this pandemic, looking at peak occupancy times, looking at things like what turnstile people entered in when we thought, you just had to touch a surface for 2 seconds and you might get COVID. Pro tip, if you ever want to avoid anything, never go through the central turnstile of anything, because 85% of people always go through the central turnstile, assuming there's no traffic. It's pretty remarkable. I think that's like this one. I can't tell for sure. It's purposely blurred out. You don't need to know all the places in Draper. You can see how people are what I call the breath of the day. People are spending their day at work. What else did I want to say here? I think there's. What this gave us is the ability to manage when people came in, manage when rooms got out of control, when rooms went over capacity. It allowed us to do the next level of things, contact trace. We're doing automated contact tracing. Unfortunately, some people people don't remember who they interacted with. Some people were in the hospital and were not able to tell HR who they came in contact with. We're able to track that through social networks, through different heat maps, doing all those sorts of things. Now I saw a great poster out there. We're taking this to the next level of all this data, looking at how to manage work from home, how people are spending their time in the building when they're here, how much time they're actually spending in the building, space planning, so on and so forth. So that's how we've taken a lot of this data and improved our operations. Another thing came directly from COVID, right, is the Great Resignation, and no company was immune to that or is immune to that. Gave you the background on Draper. That gives you an idea of how heterogeneous we are in terms of skill sets. So it's not like necessarily I lose one software engineer and there's 1,200 other software engineers to pick from. There's maybe 100 other software engineers to pick from, and maybe only 10 or 2 or 1 have the specific skill set that I need. You've got clearance levels, you've got experience levels, and so on and so forth. We had to deal with all of that. So we have all this diversity at Draper, and then we started losing people. And we're actually bigger now than we were a year ago. So we've built it back, but we started losing people and said, we need to analyze what we need to do to fix this. We've also got the other aspect of Draper where we've got about 300 projects or programs going on at any given time, right? And some are like microfabrication, right? It's not going to be like, well, Troy, why don't you go work on that? Because I have no idea how to run a fab or anything like that. So you've got this balance of types of projects. You've got this balance of different skill sets. We need to start managing that. We started taking all this data, skill sets, everything down to, when I say price is how much you get paid, but it maps to your skill level. We took the amount of people we had. We took return on investment. It's basically how much money you actually make for the company in terms of how you charge. It's a little specific. We said, hey, this is a lot like a financial portfolio, right? Where every staff is an investment and they have some trade-off and some payoff. And we use all of this data, which we had a lot of rich data for, to model an ideal employee portfolio and therefore hiring portfolio, or you can think of it as what I want to buy. in terms of how to move forward in this great resignation and hire the right skill sets, and to make sure we are robust to different sets of changes and different ups and downs. It also allowed us to stress test our workforce as well, right? You can stress test and say, what if everybody who worked in this area quit? Or what if we lost some major government contract? You can do that as well and see how that'll affect both your revenue as well as your talent, and so on and so forth. So those are two examples of both internal operations things that we've done at Draper that, once again, took 4 years before people realizing data could do this. And took two huge, crap, what do? We need someone to help fix this. But if you're going to take one note from these two things is, as you go forward in your careers, is take every opportunity, if you're that type of company, take every opportunity you can when they pop up to demonstrate the power of these tools to anybody. And when you do, it'll percolate, it'll spread, and it'll start expanding out. But don't turn down any shot you have. The last couple minutes I want to spend on where we're going now, and that's probably the most tenuous, the area of the biggest resistance is business decisions, right? Decisions that drive, are we going to make money? Real quick, because I'm running out of time. For those who don't know, winning a defense contract or a government contract, I should have said that, is a very interesting and sometimes slow but expensive process. There's actually a big debate of how to get smaller companies in that, right? It's kind of 3 stages. You start to have discussions with the government, with yourselves, of technology, what they need. The purple part, government will put out a proposal for it, and then if you're lucky and good, you win it, that's in red. All along this phase, all along this progress, you want to know and calculate what are your odds of actually winning this thing, right? Because this is actually your odds of getting future growth. This maps to how many customers you're going to have in social media or whatever platform. This maps to revenue, how many Big Macs you're going to sell if you're McDonald's. This is our revenue projection. Of course, it's, I think, quite a bit harder and quite a bit more idiosyncratic than a lot of those traditional cases, right? Sometimes it comes down to the decision of a single human being and a program manager in the government. A lot of words here. Basically, Draper was doing this in a very traditional way. You just ask the program manager at Draper, what do you think of our odds of winning? And they'll say, it's high or medium or low. And of course, that is extremely biased, extremely political, and does terrible for projections. But you know what? We had all the data to data science the heck out of this. And that's what we're doing. And we're trying to push forward to actually being able to predict our business at a much deeper level. So this is the most meaty AML part of it, right? We're taking things like, what customer is it? Is it a new or follow-on work, aka are we working on it already? Is it competitive or not? The program type, I talked about like S&T or production. Put it into an ML model and try to predict. Looked at a bunch of different things. A bunch of different types of models, logistic regression models, decision trees. And what we found, right, and what's really important here is prediction performance. Obviously, it has to do good, but the bar is really low. Any number is better than the number that Jim made up because he felt good about his work. But we found that, way better than chance. This is just a normalized, I don't want to give away the specific numbers, but normalized confusion matrix, roughly 85% of the time we can know for sure, with confidence that we're going to win a project based on certain parameters. So showing a lot of promise to basically forecast our business more accurately in a really kind of unique space that's hard to do. So that's it. If you're going to take anything from this talk, right, is if you want to transform an organization, not going to happen overnight. Might happen in an order that you wouldn't think is logical, but take every opportunity you can to demonstrate the power of it, and people will start listening. Companies like to change others before they change themselves. They like to talk about all the cool things they do before they actually do the cool things internally. the small victories and small demonstrations add up. You saw a few here. And finally, when you're trying to sell this to your peers or your superiors, biggest tip is you're going to make their jobs easier. I wouldn't phrase it as you're going to make them smarter. That might offend people, but if you promise to make their jobs easier, everybody's going to take that. And that's it.
Great talk. Maybe without revealing Draper's data, with the Great Resignation, I think every company is experiencing this loss of someone and saying, "Oh my God, what was the real loss?" We cry over $3 million of spilled milk, but so without revealing the numbers, can you speculate just what kind of a range did you see for resignation? Is it 100K, million? Just what's the range and magnitude?
So magnitude, I would say. I think that what I saw in tech, it was like 15 to 20%. I was like 15%, and I believe that's where we were at as well. And
not the resignations, but the cost. When you lose someone, what do you pay?
Our cost is, I've heard the number, and once again, this is a VP of engineering says we haven't data science. We should data science this number, but I've heard $20,000 is the cost to retrain somebody, and that's probably retraining a 2-year out of undergrad engineer, right? We actually saw in the Great Race is a lot of really advanced, high skill set people, which I would argue is, in the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. When you lose someone who, right, brings in $1 million a year in government work, I mean, you're losing at least $1 million, and yeah.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I once worked at a large defense contractor, so I know some of the pain. I'm curious, one of the challenges we had was tooling, and especially at companies which are slow to adopt new software tooling and so on. How did you guys solve that at Draper? How are you solving it?
We are fighting the good fight on the software side, right? I mentioned I just created a DevOps group. I'll tell you the biggest challenge is that you've got a bunch of you've got classifications, you've got different customers, right? You've got, for example, a Navy customer who doesn't want to push to a new software technology. Maybe it's secret, right? I'll give you a great example is you try convincing an admiral that we should have a recurrent neural network guide a nuclear missile, right? That's a losing battle and probably should be a losing battle. But a recurrent neural network to guide like a drone for an R&D DARPA project probably is pretty cool and makes sense, right? But then you've got two solutions that don't mix in the same company. You've got two software platforms. Our approach, getting to your question, is to have much of a menu, but a stable menu of, this is your classification level. This is an R&D project, or this is a statement project. You should pick these software tools, but pick from this specific list and this is how it pieced together. But it's as you know, it's hard. No one can decree anything when you've got government customers also decreeing stuff.
Back on the Great Resignation point, I liked how you had some ROIs with the loss of different specialties. What did you use to measure those? We've seen that it's very challenging. Would love to hear more about it.
Yeah, so there's a few things. It makes us, so one great thing about government work is everything is accounted, as in that I have to I don't physically punch a time card, but I enter a time card every week of the programs that I work. So you can actually track how much external government stuff I work, which brings in profit for Draper, even though Draper's nonprofit, it's a little, but brings in revenue for Draper. You can see the overhead I charge, which doesn't make money, and then if I had nothing to do, I would charge another charge code, which loses money. You can look at the amount of money I bring in through projects that I win as well, and that I'm associated with. So it's a horrible accounting system that government makes everybody do, but you can actually, in this environment, assign a revenue number to everybody. And it's not perfect, but it's better than most companies where you don't have that level of data. You.
Yeah, how have you gone about building trust with decision makers when it comes to really driving the adoption of this type of AI? You know, you're going up against a VP who's saying,
Right.
"I've done this my whole life.
Yep.
This goes against my gut instincts."
Yep.
You know, how do you build that trust?
So I think one of the key, and that was my last phrase, is if you can find the ways to automate some of the things they do and make their life easier, right? They'll start using the tools, and then you almost kind of plug in we also added this little thing that, predicts this, and they'll be like, oh, that's kind of nice. And then before they know it, they're like buying into all the different data science and AI widgets and believing it. So it wasn't a single moment of speech. It wasn't some like pounding my fist. You got to do this. It's building the tools. They're like, oh, this is nice. This is automating this, and then slowly they build up that trust, and before they know it, they're convinced. Before you know it, they're convinced.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, as you're doing, obviously you have solving problems for others, looking at things internally and then making decisions, right?
Yep.
Through this process, like, how much of the work that you're doing becomes sort of productized as opposed to, one-off analyses? So
Yeah.
you do work internally, that efficient portfolio with respect to people, like that's broadly applicable
Yep.
to other places, right? So
Yeah.
are you productizing things and going back out when you're doing them internally or whatever?
Yeah, you actually hit on what one of my hopes and dreams is. I think there's two markets for a lot of the internal stuff we're doing. One, maybe a smaller customer base, but there's a decent number of defense contractors and companies like that, and we can certainly sell to them. We do commercial work. And the biggest example of this type of mess, I could use another phrase, but is the government itself, right? So my hope one day is taking a lot of these tools where you're managing 1 million projects and 1 million different skill sets and saying, why don't we start thinking of our government workforce like this as well? But
I would love that.
yes. Ask me again in 2 years.
I liked your model that looked at something other than some guy's hunch on what the probability of winning was. Do you guys factor price or margin into there? I don't know how it works for
Yeah.
nonprofits really, because
Yeah.
did you find that it was really sensitive to price, or it's like if you slash it by 50% and buy your way in, you win it, but 1 or 2% don't matter? Just curious, because I find myself in that same dilemma all the time.
So I think we looked at overall contract value. I don't think we ever looked. I think the more interesting thing is like price compared to others, are like what the range of we could have priced it. We do have a low, right? We are a not-for-profit. We make revenue and money off it, but it's not. I think it's much more fixed for us. So we don't have that flexibility of like, should I ask for 5 or 10% profit on this?